Canada is looking to replace its aging fleet of submarines, and now the list of contenders has been narrowed down to 2 bidders.
Procuring submarines is a major decision for the Canadian Navy, for the Canadian forces,
down
for
to
the
2
Canadian
bidders.
government.
When you're set to spend over $20 billion on something, you probably want to take it for a test ride, and that's what Mark Carney is doing here at this massive South Korean shipyard.
While global leaders gathered in Seoul for the APEC summit, something far more consequential unfolded a few hundred kilometers away on Jeoje Island. In the shadow of the shipyards, Canada and South Korea quietly advanced a defense partnership worth up to $20 billion, an agreement centered on developing a new generation of advanced submarines. The deal could redefine Canada's naval capabilities and reshape power balances across the Pacific. At the center of it stand Hanwha, South Korea's defense giant competing to replace Canada's aging fleet, offering unmatched speed, endurance, and stealth. Behind the official smiles and photo ops, the alliance carried deeper strategic meaning. It wasn't merely about hardware, it was about influence, independence, and the future of military cooperation in a changing world. The coastal air around Jeoje Island carried a strange anticipation the morning 3 world leaders arrived. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stood beside South Korea's Prime Minister Kim Min-tae and Defense Minister David McGuinty as their motorcade wound toward one of Asia's most secure industrial facilities. Behind the steel gates of Hanwha Ocean, a sprawling shipyard stretching into the sea, history was quietly being written. Official statements described the visit as a diplomatic stop, but everyone present knew it marked a turning point in Canada's defense posture. Inside the massive complex, engineers led a delegation through a towering dock where an enormous submarine rested beneath cranes and scaffolding. The Dosanon Chang-ho class, All-Kesai Batch 2 submarine, 3,600 tons of precision-engineered metal, stood as a testament to South Korea's technological rise. Capable of traveling farther, operating more quietly, and staying submerged longer than anything in Canada's arsenal, it represented Seoul's transformation into a global defense powerhouse. Cameras captured Carney studying the vessel as Korean officials explained its design. Within hours, headlines across Seoul described it as a landmark visit. Few Western leaders had ever entered such a sensitive site, and Carney's presence signaled something larger. Canada was preparing to make a statement about its defense future and its evolving role in the global order. For Hanwha, the visit was validation. After years of striving to compete with Europe's dominant defense manufacturers, it was now on the verge of securing a contract that would place it among the world's elite. For Canada, the implications ran even deeper, a subtle but significant step toward redefining its national security independent of Washington's influence. No press release could conceal that shift. When the leaders later posed for photographs, their diplomatic smiles could not mask the subtext. Canada's role in global defense was being rewritten in real time. The country's long-standing reliance on U.S. defense systems suddenly looked outdated. A new type of alliance, anchored in technology, manufacturing, and strategy, was emerging between North America and the Pacific. The visit's significance became even clearer in the days that followed. It was not ceremonial. It marked the quiet beginning of a military project that will shape Canada's defense identity for decades. The Canadian Patrol Submarine Project, or CPS. This initiative is the country's largest and most ambitious defense investment in modern history. Its goal is to replace the aging Victoria-class submarines, relics from the late 20th century that have long exceeded their operational lifespan. Early estimates put the program's price tag at about 20 trillion Korean wons, roughly $20.5 billion Canadian. But with long-term maintenance, training, and technology updates factored in, the total could exceed 60 trillion Korean wons, potentially reaching close to 2.8% of Canada's GDP. Such figures underscore the extraordinary scale of the project. This is not simply a purchase, it is a reinvention of Canada's defense industrial foundation. After an exhaustive selection process that drew 25 proposals from around the world, 2 finalists remain: South Korea's Hanwha Ocean and Germany's ThyssenKrupp Marine Systems. Both meet Canada's demanding technical and political standards. Yet the final choice will depend not only on engineering but on the broader geopolitical direction Canada chooses to pursue. The winning bid will shape Canada's alliances and defense strategy for a generation. If Hanwha secures a contract, the plan envisions the first 4 submarines entering service by 2035, with a full fleet of 12 operational before 2040. The program promises to generate thousands of high-skilled jobs across Canadian shipyards, research centers, and technology firms, revitalizing industries that have languished for years. Officials describe it as a nation-building endeavor, an effort to merge innovation, manufacturing, and national security into a unified framework. Yet the deeper meaning of this project becomes clearer when seen against the backdrop of economic upheaval. In 2025, the United States introduced a sweeping protectionist policy, imposing 25% tariffs on nearly every category of Canadian exports, from metals and machinery to auto components. Framed as an effort to protect American industry, the policy's effect on Canada was immediate and severe. Within months, exports to the U.S. dropped by more than 15%. The steel industry contracted by 11%, aluminum by 25%, and automotive manufacturing by 24%. Factories slowed production, and more than 170,000 Canadian jobs were suddenly at risk. For Ottawa, the shock was sobering. The tariffs exposed just how vulnerable Canada had become to U.S. economic decisions. The CPS project, therefore, carries significance beyond military modernization. It represents a pivot towards strategic independence. By diversifying defense partnerships and investing in domestic production, Canada is seeking to reassert control over its security and economy in a world increasingly defined by protectionism and competition. What began as a quiet visit to a South Korean shipyard may, in time, be remembered as a moment Canada began redrawing its place on the world stage. Beneath the diplomatic protocol and polished speeches, a new alliance is forming, one that reaches beyond old dependencies and gestures toward a multipolar future, where nations like Canada define strength not through proximity to power, but through the partnerships they choose to build. For a nation that depends on American trade for nearly 3/4 of its exports, the shock of the 2025 tariff wave was profound. It exposed how fragile Canada's long-standing economic arrangement with the United States had become. In a televised address shortly afterward, Prime Minister Mark Carney confronted the issue directly. The special bond with the United States, he said, had reached its natural limit. Canada would need to build a future grounded in its own strength and independence. His words were not a rebuke but a recalibration, an acknowledgement that the world was shifting and Canada needed to shift with it. Soon after, Ottawa began drafting an ambitious strategy to diversify its trade network, setting a goal to double exports outside North America within a decade. At the center of this new approach stood South Korea, a country with industrial capacity rivaling Europe's and the technological sophistication to complement Canada's expertise. During the APEC summit in Seoul, Carney and South Korean Prime Minister Kim Min-seok signed the Canada-South Korea Joint Declaration on Industrial Security and Defense Cooperation. The agreement laid the groundwork for what many analysts soon called the Pacific Defense Alliance, a framework of collaboration extending well beyond the sale of submarines. What began as a defense contract has evolved into a deeply intertwined industrial network. Hanwha Ocean, South Korea's leading shipbuilder, has partnered with a range of Canadian technology firms to integrate advanced capabilities across cybersecurity, simulation, propulsion, and systems design. BlackBerry now leads the software protection architecture. L3Harris oversees integrated systems design. CAE develops next-generation training simulations, and Gastops focuses on propulsion control technologies. Together, these collaborations ensure that about 40% of the total project value is produced domestically in Canada, generating an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 engineering and technology jobs across the country. For Ottawa, the model turns military spending into a domestic growth engine, fueling innovation and job creation while strengthening national defense. For Seoul, it opens a strategic gateway into North America's defense and technology markets. Defense analysts describe it as an asymmetric technology partnership. South Korea provides rapid production and shipbuilding excellence, while Canada contributes its strengths in software, artificial intelligence, and complex systems integration. Few alliances have ever balanced those capabilities so evenly. The partnership also aligns closely with Canada's industrial and technological benefits policy, which requires foreign defense contractors to reinvest the full value of their contracts into Canadian research, development, and production. If the Canadian Patrol Submarine Project, CPSP, proceeds as envisioned, Canada would join an elite group of fewer than 10 nations worldwide capable of independently designing and building advanced submarines. Such an achievement would not only enhance the country's military autonomy but also reshape its industrial identity for decades. The ripple effects reach far beyond defense. Government projections suggest the CPSP could inject billions into the national economy, revitalizing shipyards and research hubs from Nova Scotia to British Columbia. The revival of heavy industry could breathe new life into coastal communities that have struggled since the decline of traditional manufacturing. In Nova Scotia, local shipbuilders are preparing for a surge in contracts linked to materials and long-term maintenance. On the West Coast, British Columbia's maritime sector is bracing for increased demand for naval architects, engineers, and system specialists. Even inland provinces like Ontario and Quebec are vying for component manufacturing, electronics, and assembly roles. Analysts predict that national demand for advanced materials experts, simulation designers, and propulsion engineers could rise by more than 25% over the next decade. Many observers have begun referring to this trend as a Darlington effect, a nod to the technological renaissance sparked decades ago by Canada's nuclear energy program. Then, as now, a single strategic government investment helped create a new generation of scientists, engineers, and innovators. The submarine project, in the same spirit, may mark the rebirth of Canada's modern industrial era, one where defense production and scientific advancement move hand in hand. Yet to fully grasp the magnitude of this shift, one must consider the broader context. The CPSP is not only a military modernization effort, it is a statement about the kind of future Canada intends to build and the partners it chooses to build it with. Between 2023 and 2025, South Korean investment in Canada surged by over 300%, concentrated mainly in clean energy, battery production, and hydrogen technologies. From Ontario's electric vehicle corridor to Alberta's green energy initiatives, South Korea's economic footprint in Canada is expanding rapidly. Within that context, the CPSP fits neatly into Ottawa's wider economic strategy, informally described as Made in Canada, Built with Asia. The vision is to balance old alliances with new independence, reducing reliance on American markets while maintaining strong transatlantic and regional ties. In Seoul, senior officials have compared the move's strategic weight to the formation of the UK-U.S. defense partnership decades ago. For Canada, it marks a reorientation toward the Pacific, positioning the country as a genuine player in the region rather than merely a North Atlantic partner. In Washington, the developments are being followed closely. American officials understand that Canada is not turning its back on the United States, but signaling its intent to loosen the gravitational pull that has defined the relationship for more than a century. Some analysts argue that if Hanwha ultimately secures the contract, it would mark the first major industrial realignment in North America since the creation of NAFTA. Carney's decision to deepen ties with Seoul is seen as bold,